On the 21st of February 1782, one of Britain's most scandalous trials began at Westminster Hall. An enraged aristocrat, Sir Richard Worsley, accused his close friend Captain George Bissett of engaging in a criminal conversion with his wife and demanded £20,000 in damages. For years, his wife and close friend had been secret lovers, and this, as well as other shocking revelations, would turn Lady Worsley into the most scandalous figure in Georgian Britain. But what exactly was criminal conversion, and who was the woman at the centre of the scandal that all of Britain could not stop talking about? The woman who became infamously known as Lady Worsley was born on the 5th of October 1758 in Middlesex, England. Oddly, she was christened with a male-sounding name, Seymour Dorothy Fleming, but there was a good reason for this. She was the daughter of Sir John Fleming, an Irish-born landowner who had relocated to Brompton Park in Middlesex in what is now South Kensington in London. Seymour's mother was Jane Coleman, a wealthy heiress. John and Jane's unusual choice of name honoured Seymour's maternal grandmother, who came from the influential Seymour family, the same family that had produced Jane Seymour, the third wife of Henry VIII in the 1530s. Seymour and her older sister Jane were largely raised by their mother on her own. A few weeks after Seymour turned 5 years old in 1763, her father tragically died at around 33. After 7 years of grief, her mother Jane was finally ready to remarry, and in 1770, she wed Edwin Lascelles, 1st Baron Harewood, a wealthy man whose family owned a sugarcane plantation in the Caribbean. Back in the 1760s, Edwin was building Harewood House near Leeds, one of the great country houses of the era. A famous portrait of Lady Worsley by Joshua Reynolds hangs there to this day. After her mother remarried, Seymour and Jane moved with her to live at Harewood. They had several other siblings too, but they had all died in childhood. As she grew into her teenage years, it became clear that Seymour was a headstrong young woman with a fondness for horse riding, cards and dancing. This contrasted with her sister Jane, who was described as being more reserved. As one of her deceased father's only 2 surviving daughters, Seymour would bring a large dowry to any potential marriage. This would run into tens of thousands of pounds, millions of dollars in today's money, and before long, wealthy and powerful men were lining up to win her hand. Seymour's entire life would be shaped by her marriage at a young age and the unhappiness of her relationship. Her future husband was Sir Richard Worsley. He was 7 years older than her and was born back in 1751 on the Isle of Wight, where the Worsley family had been prominent landowners since the High Middle Ages. Sir Richard had inherited a baronetcy when he was 17 years old. He was later a member of Parliament and a controller of the household of King George III. The Worsleys, like the Flemings and the Lascelles, were a wealthy family in an age when money was flooding into England, as the British Empire rose to become the world's superpower. Interestingly, Worsley had originally been courting Seymour's older sister Jane, but in 1772 she turned him down in favour of a match with the Earl of Harrington. Later he switched his attention to Seymour after they met at the York races in the summer of 1775. In a whirlwind romance that shocked polite society, he proposed in less than a week, and by the 20th of September 1775, the pair were married. Seymour was 17 years old, while Sir Richard was 24. Unfortunately for Seymour though, the marriage contract was heavily stacked in her husband's favour. While a vast fortune was handed over to Worsley, she was left with only a £400 annual allowance, effectively giving him control of the wealth she had brought into the marriage. Initially the marriage appeared fairly conventional. Lady Worsley was pregnant within a few months of the wedding and gave birth to their first child in August 1776, a son named Robert. He would, however, be their only legitimate child. Behind the grand facade of aristocratic marriage, tensions were already beginning to simmer. Seymour would later describe her husband as cold, rigid, and painfully dull, while she herself was spirited, flirtatious, and irresistibly drawn to the glamorous inner circle of Georgiana Cavendish. and before long, whispers were spreading through high society, and Lady Worsley's marriage was heading towards scandal. It wasn't long before accusations of infidelity arose within the Worsley marriage. Many sources suggest that Sir Richard was astonishingly indifferent to his wife's affairs. On one infamous occasion, he reportedly discovered one of Lady Worsley's lovers inside the house in the middle of the night, yet instead of confronting him, he simply let the man go, fueling rumours that their marriage concealed far darker secrets than anyone realised. The newspapers would later claim that Seymour had dozens of lovers, though the evidence indicates a smaller number. Of all of the men that Lady Worsley had affairs with, none would become more scandalous than Maurice George Bissett. He hailed from a noble family that had lands on the Isle of Wight, although the clan Bissett were Scottish originally. His residence on the Isle of Wight was only 4 miles away from the Worsleys' home, and Bissett was no outsider, as he was one of Sir Richard's close friends. What followed was not simply an affair, but a humiliating stab in the back that turned friendship into betrayal and sent shockwaves through Georgian high society. Yet, this scandalous affair might never have been discovered at all were it not for the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War. After France entered the war on the side of the rebels in North America, Lord Worsley was responsible for drilling militias in southern England in the event of a French attack on the coastal region. Bissett was involved in these military drills, and when Worsley rented a home at Maidstone in Kent while he was overseeing these drills, he invited Bissett to lodge there. It was during this time that the affair between Lady Worsley and Captain Bissett became common knowledge. In August 1781, Seymour gave birth to a daughter named Jane, but whispers spread almost immediately that the child was not Sir Richard's at all. Desperate to avoid an even greater public scandal, he acknowledged the baby as his own, despite widespread rumours that the true father was Bissett. What's clear is that Sir Richard was fairly unbothered by his wife's infidelity at the time. One infamous story which emerged soon afterwards was that in September 1781, he had joked about the relationship between Bissett and his wife when the trio were visiting a bathhouse in Maidstone. But while Sir Richard seemed willing to endure the humiliation of being publicly cuckolded, Seymour had grown tired of the marriage altogether. In November 1781, she took the scandal to an entirely new level, fleeing with Bissett from Kent to London, where the pair brazenly checked into the Royal Hotel together as lovers. Seymour then wrote to her maid Mary Sotheby and instructed her to send baby Jane to them in the capital along with extra clothes. Seymour appears to have believed that her dramatic elopement would finally force her husband to agree to a divorce, clearing the way for her to marry Bissett. But while Sir Richard had long tolerated her affairs, he had no intention of surrendering the fortune and status tied to their marriage. What followed was a vicious separation, a sensational courtroom battle, and a scandal that would captivate all of Britain. Lord Worsley now moved to prosecute Bissett for what was termed criminal conversion at the time, a specific charge that was levelled where a man accused a close friend of seducing his wife. Crucially, the charge excluded the wife from being able to testify, as she was not a party to the suit. Instead, in this case, Sir Richard was suing Bissett, not Lady Worsley. Richard sought £20,000 in damages, a sum that would have ruined Bissett if Lord Worsley won the case. To put this into perspective, that would be nearly £3 million in today's money. The case convened at Westminster in February 1782. Instead of denying the affair, Bissett's legal team argued that Lady Worsley had multiple lovers before him, meaning that he'd hardly stained her honour in the first place. Moreover, they also claimed that Sir Richard had been well aware of his wife's unfaithfulness, and had even seemingly encouraged it in some cases. Then, various of her former lovers were called to testify under oath. Viscount Deerhurst, who was clearly embarrassed by the turn of events, admitted that Sir Richard had once known that he and his wife had spent 3 days together in London and Southampton, and had done nothing to stop them. As the trial went on, it became all the more scandalous, and Lady Worsley's reputation was quickly going downhill. For instance, One of her doctors, William Osborne, appeared to testify that he had treated her for venereal diseases that she had probably contracted from the Marquis of Graham. It was unheard of for medical issues like this to be publicly discussed in court in the 18th century. Meanwhile, newspapers, cartoons and pamphlets were published in London outlining the salacious revelations in the trial. In the end, the court ruled in Sir Richard's favour. There was no doubt that Lady Worsley and Bissett were having an affair, yet the jury awarded Sir Richard just 1 shilling in damages, the smallest possible sum. It was a devastating public humiliation. The verdict effectively declared that while his wife had been unfaithful, Sir Richard himself had openly tolerated, even encouraged her affairs. As the scandal continued to spread across Britain, the lives of all three would never be the same again. The 1782 trial was a disaster for everyone involved. Sir Richard's political career never recovered. A transcript of the entire trial was on sale in London within a few days of the whole thing ending and became a bestseller, with George Washington even owning a copy on the other side of the Atlantic. This meant that Lady Worsley's reputation was also destroyed by the trial, and soon there were bawdy pamphlets circulating too with titles like The Genuine Anecdotes and Amorous Adventures of Sir Richard Easy and Lady Wagtail. Also, the conclusion of the trial didn't mean that the Worsleys could divorce, so that Seymour and Bissett could live happily ever after. In fact, Sir Richard refused to agree to a divorce, as he stood to lose financially if he did, and Seymour would acquire control of the dowry she had brought to the marriage. In a dramatic turn of events, Bissett then left Lady Worsley. Thus, she ended up in the worst of all worlds. Her reputation was destroyed. Her lover and the father of her daughter left her, and her husband refused to grant her a divorce, meaning that she was also left destitute, especially so because her own wider family disowned her as well. Not only this, but she was also pregnant with another of Bissett's children. After giving birth in 1783, she became a courtesan to survive, relying on the money and patronage of wealthy men. In the period that followed, Seymour became a member of the New Female Coterie, a group of women who met in a brothel run by Sarah Prendergast. It was basically a kind of support network for women of the nobility, whose reputations had been destroyed in one way or another, and who were living in precarious circumstances. Its members included Lady Anne Cork and Lady Derby, while the founder of the coterie, Caroline Stanhope, was the mother-in-law of Seymour's own sister Jane. Caroline, like Seymour, had become notorious years earlier for her adultery. As part of the coterie in the mid-1780s, Lady Worsley had numerous further lovers, but yet again, her life was about to take an even darker turn. As much as she tried to maintain herself, Lady Worsley's debts began to mount in the years following her separation, and eventually she left London to go and live in Paris, where there was a greater tolerance of women who had been publicly accused of extramarital affairs. She then became a fixture at the French court at Versailles, and gave birth to another daughter named Charlotte who was sent away to be raised by another family. One of her lovers here was Joseph Bologna, Chevalier de Saint-Georges, a biracial composer and champion fencer. The time she decided to join the French court, though, was not ideal, and in 1789, the French Revolution began. The years of the Revolution were not easy for her, and she was arrested by the revolutionary government during the Reign of Terror in 1793 on account of her noble status and ties to the royal court. This eventually led to her being imprisoned, and during this dark period of her life, her son with Worsley also passed away. Finally, in 1797, she escaped back to England. At this juncture, she reconciled with her family and began to live quietly at her childhood home, Brompton Park, as she entered her 40s. While his wife moved around, Sir Richard continued to have a mixed career. In the period prior to the French Revolution, he lived on the Isle of Wight with his mistress, Sarah Smith. During the French Revolutionary Wars, he was appointed as the British envoy to the Venetian Republic. He died back in Britain in 1805, aged 54, at which time his estate was saddled with heavy debts, an all too common feature of life for the British aristocracy in an era of excessive drinking, gambling, and the wasting of vast fortunes on elaborate home building. Despite her estranged husband's financial illiteracy, after his death, Seymour was finally able to regain control of the £70,000 she had brought into the marriage. For more than 2 decades, the fortune had been tied up in legal disputes. Suddenly restored to immense wealth, she was able to leave behind the years of precarious living she had endured in both England and France. The former Lady Worsley was also able to finally remarry. On the 12th of September 1805, little more than a month after the death of her husband, she married John Louis Couchet, a 26-year-old musician. She retook her Fleming surname, which, in an unusual development for the time, Couchet also took as well. Her remarriage right before her 47th birthday was a more peaceful affair. Most accounts agree that it was a happy relationship, and they lived a quiet life by comparison with the drama of her first marriage. After the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars ended in 1814 and 1815, the couple moved to Paris and lived in the French capital for the remainder of Seymour's life. She died there on the 9th of September 1818 at 59 years of age from an unspecified illness. The woman who had once become notorious in the British public eye was buried in the famous Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris, where she lies today amongst the graves of people like Jim Morrison, Oscar Wilde, Edith Piaf, and Frédéric Chopin, a fitting end to a scandalous life. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Lady Worsley. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of her life down below in the comments, and if you have any suggestions, also let me know down below in the comments. I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.